Hi, this is Joseph Arthur. Thanks for checking out Come to Where I'm From. Please support us on Patreon, patreon.com/come to where I'm from. We are an independent podcast, and any contributions you can make are greatly appreciated. Well, Philippe Petit, thank you for joining us. And so we're in the smallest theater in the world. Is that correct?
Yes, I built this barn with 18th century tools and methods to harbor my equipment.
Right.
And then at some point I said I need to add a stage and a little curtain and create the smallest theater in the world where I do little performances for the local kids. Or, I just love the idea of having a very small theater.
Yeah. And is this also like a rehearsal room when you're...
Yes. When the weather outside is not good, I am here rehearsing.
That's great. And so there's no nails or anything. It's all made with
screws.
Well,
there are hundreds of nails for the roofing and for the sheathing of the walls outside. But the structure itself has no nails at all. It's post and beam, tenon and mortise, and true nails, which are the pegs, the wooden pegs, to assemble pieces,
Oh, cool. So what made you interested in the 18th century style of building stuff?
I love the 18th century, the way the crafts were, developing. And I looked at books on how to build barns before I built this one. And I was very interested in the old tools, with no electricity, the boring machine, the tea auger, the saw, the chisel, the mallet. With 3 or 4 tools, you can build a Taj Mahal,
Right. What do you think provoked that interest in you specifically?
Well, I like perfection, I like simplicity, I like traditions. So I fell in love with the post and beam because the first thing you do is you have to know how to trace the line, you have to know how to sew, you have to chisel the number in a Roman numeric, the number of the joint.
Okay.
In this barn, before the roof and the walls, there was 50 joints, and each had a number. So this is a tradition from the 18th century and earlier, and I fell in love with that.
Right on. Yeah, and you have the philosophy of measure once, cut once.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm glad you
don't
remembered that.
You don't like measure twice, measure twice, cut once. That's a no-go.
Well, it's why to measure twice if your mind is focused on measuring. You don't need to measure 12 times.
Yeah. But most people don't develop a trust in their own or in themselves to the degree that somebody who walks out on a wire, across the Twin Towers would have to do, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
In other words, that's a relationship, I think.
Mm-hmm.
As far as that goes, when you say measure once, when you do all your tight wire walking, you do all the math and the engineering and you check everything yourself just once each time?
Yes. No, actually, as a self-taught engineer, when I develop a rigging plan and I design my anchor point and I calculate the forces, I sometimes do 10-time checking and all that, because this is not the actual work. But on the land, once I have my precise final rigging plan, it's pretty simple. I know what I'm doing and I don't need to check it 3 times,
What do you think the relationship between inspiration and rebellion is?
Inspiration, and let's extend that to creativity.
Yeah.
I think to be a great creator, you have very often in any arts, you have to break the rules.
Right.
Some people say it's good to know the rules. I almost tend to not want to know the rules. It's easier to break them.
Yeah.
But I think in any art, once you have learned the rule, to progress in your creativity, very close to inspiration. Mm-hmm. Inspiration is what triggers creativity. You have to break the rules. You have to expand. You have to explore. You have to make mistakes. You have to try things. It's much more interesting than to settle into a safe system once you have achieved certain goals, and repeat yourself and stay in that comfortable zone. I think to create interestingly, you have to be in an uncomfortable zone and you have to be risking. That's why my last book, I have written 11 books, but my last book title is Creativity, the Perfect Crime.
Yeah, so there's a criminal element and a rebellious element to what you do, I think.
Yeah, from the moment I was 4 or 5 years old, I had that criminal. I mean, the word criminal is a little bit big if you describe a 4 years old kid doing things, but there was the element of rebellion. I remember rebellion against school and parents and authority, and I remember that as a 4 or 5 years old kid, I was climbing everywhere, and everybody would say, "Don't climb because it's dangerous and you might fall." And to me, that was like ridiculous. You have to explore, you have to expand your boundary, and I got that feeling as a 4, 5, 6 years old child, which is kind of unusual.
It is unusual. I was similar. I remember making puppets and purposefully making them like, I'm going to make this one disturbing. Like on purpose, there's that rebellious thing I think that artists have, but it feels like to me that also you're trying to show other people that they can break out of their own confines. Like
absolutely.
In a way that feels like some of your purpose. Is that right?
Yeah. It's very contagious once you are passionate and once you create without boundaries. I think it reaches people and inspire them.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's funny because I rewatched Man on Wire last night, knowing I was coming to talk to you, which is a wonderful, wonderful documentary about your courageous feat that I'm sure everybody knows, walking across the Twin Towers on the tightrope. But
which is 45 years ago, 2 days ago.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So congratulations again. But I'm struck too with all the people that were helping you do that. And the funny thing is, you in a dentist office having a vision a long time ago or an idea like that just sparks like that, and then it manifests, and then there's something like a bolt of lightning accumulates people around it too to help you accomplish that. Because I think like you say, inspiration is contagious. What do you think draws people into an idea that makes it a collective thing like that?
Well, in the case of my idea to walk the Twin Towers, it's what you describe. It's in the film Man on Wire. I was in a dentist office and I was looking at old magazine, and I saw not a picture of the towers because they were not built yet, but I saw a picture of a model, architecture model, and that triggered a dream. So anything can trigger a dream. You observe something, you smell something, you touch something, you use your senses, and then there is a little trigger, and then a dream is born. But most people do not recognize the fact that they should look for trigger of dreams. I mean, dreaming is a very serious business, because once you dream, in my opinion, you have, again, to break the rules to make your dream come true. And sometimes your dream is impossible, such as the idea of bringing a ton of equipment illegally at the top of the highest towers in the world in 1974. This is an impossible dream.
Totally.
So I thought, okay, when you have an impossible dream, start achieving reality one step at a time. You see, I'm talking like a wire walker.
Yeah.
The image of one step at a time is a very beautiful, powerful image.
It really is.
When the dream is impossible, don't run away. Confront your dream and start one step at a time.
And what you said about learning to recognize those flashes that just happen really quick and seem to be almost like, there's so many of them you could just go, oh, that's just whatever. That's just my mind. You know what I mean? You could brush off a dream that could be as great as that one.
Was there something that you dreamed of that was even more impossible than the Twin Towers that you feel you executed, or?
Yeah, many times. I mean, in a few days from now, I will be 70 years old. And on my birthday, I decided to achieve a dream, a small dream, but to go to the Sharon Gogs, the very famous rock cliff in the Catskills, which is in New Paltz, and then with a guide to do a quite exposed climb, which is called high exposure because it's very exposed. You're not in a crevasse. You're in the opposite. You're on a ledge, and then there is all 300 feet of space around you when you are at the top, and this was daring because I love to climb, but I am not an experienced climber. I have started climbing at 4 or 5 years old. But again, I'm not a professional climber. So I called, I organized it, and I'm going to go at 6 a.m., meet my guide, and we're going to climb. And that is a big dream.
With harnesses and everything,
yes,
not
of
like
course.
on the wire.
Free
No.
solo.
I will never solo a cliff
Free
of that
solo.
magnitude. It's like a 300 feet cliff
Yeah.
without safety, and I will not do it alone. I am accompanied by a guide who is going to guide me and who is going to assure me. But he's not going to pull on the rope. I will have a harness and a rope. The rope is for safety.
Right.
So I will actually climb that rock by myself,
That's amazing. So what's the do you meditate?
No, but I am sure I do things that are close to meditation. When I prepare myself for a highway walk,
Right.
I put myself in a certain state of mind that I'm sure is close to meditation.
It has to be.
At the same time, I'm frantic and I have so many things to do. In the example of preparing for a highway walk, that is the opposite of meditate. But once the work of the installing the cable, the rigging is done, before to put my performing costume, there is a little hinge there, a little transition in which I try to calm down and breathe and collect myself, and I am sure that's very close to meditation.
Yeah, I would think so. Like you would seem to be having to, like when you're on the wire, you would have to be concentrating. Like I would think, like being in the moment precisely. You can't be like your mind can't be wandering.
No.
Way and that way. It's like because there's that the way it's described in the film was at first there was a bit of fear when like the moment you stepped from the building onto the wire. And then you started going, and there was all of a sudden sort of joy took over your face, and there was you started dancing and flying, I guess, up there.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was this transition from being very careful to knowing that I am enough in control, and then there's a big smile invading my face. You're right.
Yeah. And then you stayed up there for 45 minutes and did 8 passes.
It was not planned at all. It was all improvised. But my friends told me I didn't have any watch and I didn't count the crossings.
Right.
But they told me that. Yeah.
And you sensed that the people below could see you and were somehow interacting with you, even though...
Oh, yes. I heard the applause of the crowd. There was a giant... traffic jam, and I could hear the clamor of the crowd saluting, applauding, screaming at me,
Right. And was there fear involved, or
no? There was not really
afraid?
no fear. I was too much involved in the moment, as you said earlier.
Yeah. And what made you decide to lay down? Was that a performance instinct?
It's one of my trademark in the sky. I have done it almost at the beginning of my life as a wire walker. Yeah. And it's a beautiful picture because it's almost like a daydreaming. You see somebody laying, it's like they fall asleep, Yeah. So I like that. And also because the wire walker suddenly is confronting the sky.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful move that has become a little bit my signature in the sky.
Yeah. I like what you were saying too about how you reject the sort of circus antics of like, oh no, I might fall, because that's to frighten people, whereas your motivation is to inspire people.
That is true. Yeah.
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 And so you've kind of like redefined the art in a way.
Yeah, I think I did.
Throughout the years, you seek to inspire people all the time. Who are some of the people that you got inspiration from?
Actually, in this rehearsal studio, that is this barn that I built, that is the smallest theater in the world, I have placed 2 frames with many pictures, one here and one on the other side. So those 2 frames, I won't mention all the names, there's a lot of names of artists that have inspired me. Some are still alive, some are no longer with us, some I never met, some became my best friends. So let's mention, for example, Werner Herzog. Who is a good friend. Francis Brune, the greatest juggler in the world, is no longer alive, but he was my best friend. And then, a pianist, a painter, a comic character like Buster Keaton, W.C. Fields, all kind of people, in not necessarily performers, but people that have inspired me. So I keep saying I have learned by myself most of my art, but I had a lot of invisible teachers whispering to me, and that's inspiration. It's very important for a performer, for anybody, to be inspired. You cannot live a life in balance and in joy without being inspired.
How do you stay inspired?
Well, sometimes I don't stay inspired. Sometimes I lose my inspiration. Sometimes I feel miserable. I'm sure many artists have ups and downs in their spirits. But it is by opening my antennas that I get those inspirations,
Right.
But when I am rehearsing in the barn, let's say juggling, if I get really tired or if I want to give up because I don't know, I am not inspired, I look at those 2 frames and I look at all those people who have fought all their life for their art, and it gives me it rekindles my energy,
Yeah. Do you think being a creative is like a solitary existence, or leads one to a solitary existence, or do you think you can?
I feel, but I don't know. I feel it's mostly solitary because you are, when I rehearse, when I practice, when I rehearse, I draw from what I do for the past 55 years. So it's very personal, very intimate. And I try to progress, try to find new ideas, try to develop, a gesture that I had done for 20 years, thinking, well, I could go a little bit further and I could do this or I could do that. I try things, I explore. So this is very solitary game, Mm-hmm. But of course, it stopped being solitary when the performer performs. Then you need the audience, and then you show the result of your entire lifetime of hard work to an audience, and you entertain and you inspire, I hope.
What's your daily schedule like with rehearsing and practicing?
I don't have a daily schedule. I play it by ear. But what I do is, before I fall asleep, I write down what I would like to do tomorrow. Uh-huh. And then it turns out I don't have enough hours in the day to do all what I plan to do. So then I look at this piece of this little list, which is silly, at the end of the day, and I cross out all what I have done. And there's still a lot of things to do. So then I reinvent a priority schedule for the next day. What I do pretty much every day is my practice. Those 3 hours of warming up, exercise, juggling, and the high wire. And this usually I start at 1:45. And it takes a big chunk of time. Of course, it depends on the weather. Sometimes I know it's going to rain, so I start early. Sometimes, like today, I had agreed to take some time for this interview, so I couldn't, just practice until I decide to stop. So I made it a little bit shorter. So I adjust, but basically every day is my, the center of the day is my practice, and I feel so good after, I feel powerful and light and happy.
It's like a spiritual practice, I guess.
Yeah, it is very spiritual for me. Yeah. The body and the soul have to be in communion to do what I do, you know.
Yeah.
It's not just repetition. It's repetition with exploring, with being on the lookout. You know, it's very creative and very tiring, of course. You know.
Well, if it wasn't creative, I don't think you would have the motivation to do it. It would have to.
That is true. That is true. Yeah, very well observed. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have to, because that's the fuel of it, the spirit.
Yeah.
You know, not just the physical aspects of it. Another aspect of the film I really liked was the crutches. How the misfortune of your foot getting punctured by a nail led you to have easy in and out. You know.
I think that's another part of creativity. I think you should draw, one should draw on even backlash and in bad news, mistakes, you know, everything that is supposedly bad, you can build and make it positive, you know. Right. And that's a good example, the crutches. I needed a pair of crutches, and then it turns out to be a perfect tool to spy illegally in a building.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I love about it, is the fact that it's like, you know, so many metaphors of all of life and lessons you can learn.
What was there ever a point where you were discouraged after an attempt or a project, something that didn't go so well?
Yeah, I was talking earlier that I think most artists go up and down in their spirit. Well, in my life, and I started at 6 years old doing magic, 14 doing juggling, and 17 doing the wire. So I started to performing very early. There had been all kind of drawback and bad news. I would work for years on a project, and suddenly they told me I couldn't get the permission, or they couldn't get the money, or it was cancelled for a political reason or whatever. So actually, I have in my storage room, I have a big trunk full of dossier and files on performance that did not happen. So there is a big tag on the trunk, and it says no. And one day I want to write the book of no. Not all the things that were refused, because it's like 300, or maybe I exaggerate, maybe it's 50 through my life, but maybe take 3 or 4 of the most interesting, or the one where I spent 14 years developing and studying and doing drawing of rigging, and then suddenly the whole pyramid collapsed, and it will never happen. So it would be interesting to show all the energy on working on projects that destroy themselves, you know. Usually they don't destroy themselves. A human being destroy them by saying, no, I cannot find the money, no, I will not give you permission, no, we don't want to do that. So it's very painful when I open this big box, but sometimes I open that box to look at a project that is very similar to a project I'm working on. You know, so I want to see, let's say, on this high wire, how many guidelines I was planning, because it's almost the same length. So I go into my no box, I find a work that has more or less the length of the one I am planning today, and I say, I had 12 guidelines, the cavaletti, it's called, you know, or how much tension, to stabilize the wire, or, you know, how much tension in that project I was at the time, and so it guides me, but it's painful, because I look, sometimes I really spend 5, 6, 10, in one instance, 14 years on a project. Really? And then it was destroyed.
What was that project?
That project was a canyon walk, to put an immense wire above, not the Grand Canyon, but an arm of the Grand Canyon in the Navajo Nation. And I spent 14 years, a little bit like Christo would spend, you know, 10 years trying like to put the banners of a Central Park, and, you know, it didn't happen, or it did happen, but it's very similar, and the show never happened, you know.
So you couldn't do this in a form of rebellion. This you need.
Oh no, you need 3 months on the land. You need to build a road with dynamite. You need 3 helicopters. You need millions of dollars to hire contractors. This is not something you can do overnight illegally. No.
And you've only ever fallen once in a rehearsal, right?
Well, that doesn't count because a wire walker, is performing.
Right.
So I never had an incident performing. But when you rehearse, when you practice, when you try things, then of course you have bad moments, and
right.
so no, my record as a performer on the high wire is very positive.
It's 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that fall like though when that?
Well, I don't talk about fall because I talk about walking, which is the opposite.
Yeah.
I learned my entire life to create beautiful walks, which they don't seem to be interested in the circus because, as you mentioned earlier, the circus tradition is into being in difficulty or falling fear, or showing the records, the longest, the highest. All of those things are to me the opposite of walking in a nonchalant, in a easy way, which never is easy, of course, but to make almost forget that you are on a wire, and that's very close to perfection. So I spend my life, I still do it, I perfect walking.
Right.
So when somebody in an interview or somewhere asks me about the opposite of walking, flying away from the rope, I cannot talk about it.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, I asked.
No. It's perfectly fine to ask.
But it's interesting though too, because it's like I feel like a lot of people could learn from that philosophy. So in a way, I'm glad I asked.
Yes. The reason I am solid on the wire, performing on the wire, is because I have a certitude of victory, and that certitude is very physical and very mental,
Yeah, and you visualize in advance.
Oh, yes. I cannot walk on the wire with a question mark hovering over me.
Right.
I have to walk on the wire with an exclamation point, with a certitude of victory.
And how do you develop that?
Well, that is impossible to explain. There is no recipe for creating a faith.
Faith.
That faith is the right word. It's almost a religious feeling of you have to trust yourself. You have to know your limits because you're not immortal. You're not superhuman. So. And then you have to create a faith, and that faith comes from thousands of hours practicing, I am sure, and performing as well. Performance that were successful, performance that I, as an artist, felt were not great, And again, we're back into the up and down. But all those things, all those variations of feelings and moods of the performer create an experience, a life experience that in itself create in turn the faith, the sensation, the feeling in your body and in your mind that I will never set foot on a wire if I were not sure to succeed on the other side.
Right. But so how often do you spend visualizing before you do, a walk, for instance?
I do not visualize. I immerse myself into the big work as an engineer of creating anchor point, deciding the rigging. I immerse myself as an artistic person, a performer, a director, absolutely, a theatrical director, in creating a performance and in rehearsing that performance and thinking of the costume and the music and the light and the sound when the show has those elements. And those two things combined, I arrived to the moment of the show, and I didn't really visualize.
It's not like you're
not. But it's close to visualizing because, like, for example, I have a show in 3 weeks.
You do.
On a small wire inside a theater, and I'm rehearsing my show every day. So I guess I visualize the show, but not really. I go through the run-through of the show,
right?
Which is very close to visualizing it.
I guess.
But I'm not visualizing it. I am acting it.
You're acting it out, yeah. But when you're acting it out, you also see yourself in that other performance space sometimes?
Not really. No. When I act out, I am completely immersed in trying to do the most beautiful walk possible, and then also the series of walk, and then go from the beginning to the end of the show in the most fluid and balanced way. So all that takes all my mind.
Yeah. So you brought up spirituality and faith. I was wondering if there's like some kind of relationship to God or a creator that you're in
Well, I believe in
with.
many gods. I mean,
Right.
it's kind of ironic because I am an artist in residence of the largest Gothic cathedral in the world, St. John the Divine, in New York City. And when I became an artist in residence 40 years ago, the dean said, Philippe does not believe in God, but God believes in Philippe because he saw me walk many times in the church to help the church. So that's ironic, but it's also quite beautiful. So I don't believe in a God that is listed in the God list, but I believe in many gods. And actually, the way I talk about the performance at the World Trade Center in my book, To Reach the Clouds, which had been retitled Man on Wire after the Oscar we got for the documentary, and that had been retitled The Walk after Zemeckis did with Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing me, a 3D IMAX Hollywood film, very different than Man on Wire. So a book that goes through 3 titles, it's interesting.
Yeah.
The reason I mentioned that is because in that book, I dealt with the actual walk, which was a short chapter remembering what happened during the Maine crossing and the 45 minutes. And then the title of that chapter is Meeting the Gods.
Right.
And that answers, in a way, your question is because I talk about the God of the tower, the God of the wind, the God of the balancing pole, the God of the cable. So I believe in many gods.
Yeah. And kind of becoming a god in a way, like becoming famous and
That's never has been my discourse. I will never even fantasize taking myself for a god and being famous or
I don't
rich.
mean literally like
is
a god.
not my goal in life at all.
I don't think it was your goal, but it's just interesting that when you dance with the gods, then something rubs off. Of something, something of a godlike thing.
That's
rubs
interesting.
Off.
It's not for me to say, but many people have said something similar.
Yeah,
and it's a great compliment for a performer when you inspire people and when they give you this kind of compliment.
Right.
But again, it doesn't come from me.
Right.
The godlike
I wasn't suggesting that. So, but also you believe in living every day like. With great risk and creating every day like a great work of art. Is that true?
Yes, and not necessarily great risk, but a certain amount of risk. And I'm not talking about physical risk, which will be stupid to not look left and right before to cross a road and you can be hit by a bus. That is plainly stupid. That's for somebody who has no respect for life. But I'm talking about an intellectual risk.
Right.
And yes, even in small, almost invisible intellectual risk is, I think, needed to spice your day. And sometimes you're barely aware of it, Yeah,
and what does that look like for you?
Well, as an example, if I have a movement that I have done for 30 years, right, in my juggling, the intellectual risk, not risk, but yes, the challenge will be to look at this move that I know so well and to see, can I expand it? Can I vary it? Can I have an option? Can I do a little something to make it new? And that is very challenging, and it could be something so small. It could be the way the hand moves or the way the fingers are together or not together, whatever it is. It could be a minute variation that somebody in the audience will not even see the difference, but to you who is doing it, it's a giant change, So I have done that.
How is that risk, though, to you?
Well,
Isn't that just practice?
no, it is practice with an attitude of intellectual risk.
Yeah.
I give you an example.
I get it.
I call that a first.
Okay.
In my little diary, I write a diary every day when I practice.
And every day you keep
yes,
a diary?
Yes. I write the moves, I write my timing, I write how many times I succeed to do a certain move.
Wow.
And whenever something new happens, new in my entire life, then I have a marker, a underliner, orange, and I put a little orange mark and I write first. Which
Right.
means it's the first time in my life that this happened. And then I write what happened. So
Yeah.
it could be a thought that when I am doing the roll of the ball on one arm, I should think of my feet. And all my life I never thought, but actually I'm going to practice with the feet in a certain position.
Okay.
And it's more beautiful or it's more conducive to what's happening with my arm. So those little inventions, I write first. And then I look at the week, of notes every day. And it's very rare that I have a page of notes, the minutes of one of my practice without one of those little orange marks. And sometimes in a week, I have like 5 or 6 of those. Some are giant discovery for me. I have to call my best friend and say, you know what happened today? I discovered a new move. And some are very small, again, that nobody would notice. It's a little variation on a move, or sometimes it's a half a second stop, like I roll the ball, stop it for half a second and roll it back. And that little stop gives the move more magic feeling, you see? So that's the scope of my intellectual risk and of my deliberate challenges to create.
That's fascinating because it's just like it denotes like such a extreme love of your craft throughout all these years. And like, do you ever get disillusioned or bored, or like that seems like so engaged? And to me, that's a huge
sometimes I
gift.
want to kill myself. That's not being bored. But disillusion, yes, again, we're talking about the ups and downs of an artist's
I brought up
life.
the fall again, I guess.
Yeah. No, but I think everybody in life experience, life duress and life rejoice.
I guess it's just rare to hear somebody speak, like to have that kind of passion with their craft throughout so many years that they're writing down, like as you describe, like that's enviable is what I'm trying to say.
That's very nice. In my creativity book, I reproduced in a double page one of those typical minutes of diary of practicing.
Okay.
And then you will see
in your recent book.
Yes, in a creativity book.
Yeah.
And then you see, for example, it's ridiculous because I have a grid which I cannot print. I do it by hand, like in the 18th century with a ruler and a pencil. And the grid covers the work with a hat, the work with one ball, the work with the 3 balls, and the work with the 6 hoops, which is part of my hour and a half of juggling, usually in the barn. And I have all the major exercise symbolized by one little sketch. For example, I have one line to symbolize my body, and the head is one ball, and on top of my head, but not touching, is a circle, which is the ball, and that symbolizes the bouncing on the ball. So in that little column, I have first my world best number. It could be 17 years ago. I did 152 bounds. So I have that as a goal, not as a goal, but as a signal that I have achieved that.
High watermark.
And then today, I don't know what, I am not inspired, I didn't work well today, I did like 12. So I put 12 and I put a question mark, so why so low?
What's up?
And then I try the next day, I look at the 12 of yesterday and I think, I have to do more than 12.
You gotta beat
so
12.
Today I bounce the ball and I do 17. So I write 17, but because 17 is bigger than the 12 of yesterday, I circle. Even if the 12 of yesterday in my example, if I do 13, still it's a progress. So I will circle 13. So at a glance, when I look at all those little grid, I can see, there was a flat week. I didn't work too well. Or I said, there is a lot of circle, which means I beat what I did yesterday. And then if I do, in my example of 12 bounds and 15 bounds, if I do 42 bounds, then I circle it twice, because it's like, wow, it's
like
a big
giving
progress.
yourself a star.
So, well, I use a lot of star system
that's
as well.
funny. It's a system of self-encouragement.
Yes, it is.
And like almost like self-parenting in a
and
way. Like
it's completely childish and ridiculous.
No,
but
I think quite the opposite.
Thank you.
No, I mean, I'm just saying, no, because it's like to be a lifelong artist is a feat in and of itself. I mean, and so to keep yourself that engaged and that inspired and that enthused about it.
I am never bored. That is to answer the boring word that you place in one of your questions. No, don't be sorry at all. You can address any question. But the thing is, with all these reference to the past, to the present, to yesterday, I live in a perpetual state of perfection or perfecting my craft. And then sometimes it's a great practice. And I do a few first, okay? And I have a lot of circle, which means it's better than yesterday. And sometimes it's kind of flat, and sometimes it goes down. Sometimes I throw the ball and I do 2 and it falls. And I cannot cheat. If I do it again, I might do 15. But today, when I did the bouncing, I did 2. So I put 2, and I sometimes put a question mark. So why was it so loud?
It's almost like you're describing a system of pickpocketing the spirit world.
Oh, I like that very much, not only because I am a pickpocket.
I know, it was a segue.
It's a beautiful image, what you just said.
Thank you. I actually wrote you a poem, too. I'll read it to you later.
Okay.
But like...
I didn't tell Philippe about you. Joe is a musician and a poet and an artist.
Oh, okay.
So he doesn't know that you guys have a lot in common, I feel, between the music or the performance on stage. And,
I paint live, too, and sing and paint at the same time.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. I'm a yogi, too. Like, I'm working on trying to paint live on my hands.
Oh, amazing.
So, but, it's like you're pickpocketing the spirit world to keep your enthusiasm engaged, or you're also picking the lock of the spirit world, too.
Lockpicking is also one of my
But it's like a psychological thing that you're doing, too, like within yourself, that I think a lot of people could just to keep that level of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Like that's the gift or the secret, I think. How did you get into pickpocketing?
I think I know it was from my street juggling. I have done 55 years of street juggling. I still do it, but episodically, not regularly. And being chased by the police and being arrested more than 500 times. But anyway, it is in my early age of juggling in the street, from 18 years old on. In my crowd in Paris and then all over the world, I would see a lot of pickpockets. And I will observe the good pickpocket, the bad pickpocket, and then there is a branch of magic on stage called pickpocket. So on stage it's not the same as in the street. On stage it's performing entertainment.
Right.
In the street it's criminal.
It's for real.
But I became a street pickpocket for a short time, but I never could actually steal. I had to give back things in a way. But anyway, what I was fascinated by, and I wrote a book called L'Art du Pickpocket, The Art of the Pickpocket. Unfortunately, it's only in French at the moment, but I would love to have it published in English. And then in which I show and pay homage to the ballet of the fingers and the psychological misdirection, which is beautiful. And of course, the criminal act does not interest me. And I even in my book have a little chapter on how to protect yourself from criminal pickpocket.
I'd like to read that chapter.
It's very similar to magic.
It's very similar to magic, and it's a branch of magic.
What's beautiful about it?
Meaning you have magic, juggling, ventriloquism, pickpocket. You have all those arts that are part of the magical arts.
Yeah. And what do you find beautiful about pickpocketing?
I just said what I find beautiful is the ballet of the fingers and the sophistication of the misdirection.
And I also heard you say that it wasn't about pulling something out of somebody's pocket, but rather closing the fingers and letting them walk away from it.
This is wonderful. I love your observation because you have read part of my work and you mention it, and this is essential.
Yeah.
Yes, people might think that to pickpocket is to grab something, okay, and then to pull. But actually, a good pickpocket will grab something and wait for the people to donate as a gift what you have. You have not taken it. They are giving it to you. They leave it. I mean, again, it's a poet in me talking, but
the criminal in you talking.
in this book of Pickpocket, I use a lot of that poetic language, you know. And if you see Robert Bresson film The Pickpocket, you know, an old film from the 50s, you see in the criminal description of pickpocket in the street, you see a lot of fantasy, a lot of poetry, a lot of allegory, you know, and metaphors. And I love that film.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I think I've seen that a long time ago. Old black and white film. Yeah. And you talk about the fact that, like, picking a lock is like a metaphor for not giving up.
Absolutely, because when I mention often this image, I do lectures. So when I do lecture, I talk about, again, impossible dream. And I said, you're on a path to somewhere, and suddenly there is a giant slab of rock falling and blocking your path. I use the name granite, you know, the hardest rock. And I said, when you have a slab of granite blocking your path, don't say, oh, I cannot continue, and turn around and forget your dream. Approach the obstacle and look, and very often you'll find a little fissure. Now, again, it's a metaphor. A little fissure, you can go through it in a molecular fashion. And then we are very close to lockpicking, because lockpicking, a lock is very small. And the tool of the lockpickers are extremely small, because they go inside the lock and they separate the tumbler and the little pins that fall and block the key path, and you have to lift the pin one by one. There's usually 4 or 5 or 6 pins to lift one by one, and when you are almost the last one, if you make a wrong move, all the other one that were free lock again. So it's a very hard study, the lockpicking study, and I studied it and I taught it to my friend Werner Herzog, who used it in some of his films.
Which one?
For example, Rescue Dawn. There is. He didn't credit me, but he should have.
Damn it,
I taught him how with a nail you can actually lift the pins, but it was a handcuff, and primitive handcuff, much simpler than a padlock. But anyway, the padlock, the art of lockpicking a padlock is the art of insinuating your mind into a minuscule little world of fissure and making the door open.
Right.
You know, so it's something that should be taught in schools, you know.
Yeah.
Lockpicking.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's that's funny. It's time and discipline and patience. These are like 3
time,
things.
discipline, patience. That's
time, discipline.
Again, you are completely right in your observation there. Yeah.
But that goes across so many of your disciplines, of your pursuits. Is those 3 aspects.
And you know, actually, when I look at what I do so many things. It's just ridiculous. One day, I think it was in a lecture, I was writing on the board, and I said, okay, let's write what I do. So I built a barn. I am a juggler. I'm a pickpocket. I am a lecturer. I am a theatrical director. I am a builder of barn. And the list was so long, I was scared. I thought, this is crazy. At the same time, all the things that I do have the same common denominator. They are passion, which is the motto of my action. There is tenacity. There is a quest for perfection. A quest because you never reach perfection. There is never give up. There is no such thing as an impossible thing. So it works in everything I do. I really hate when I hear mostly a young person trying something once or twice and say, "Oh, I cannot do it."
Right.
You cannot declare that you cannot do something if you try twice. Now, if you try 2,000 times,
Yeah.
well, that's something else. Okay?
There is a limit.
But, and it's very rare to see a kid trying something again and again and again and again 200 times. Then the friends will say, he's crazy. Because look at that, he's trying to climb and he cannot reach the fissure there. But he keeps trying. And that is the beauty of being human, is you have to keep trying. And when you keep trying, if you don't try like a robot or a machine, just duplicate the same thing. But if you try again with making your mind and imagination flourish, then you will conquer, you will progress, even in a tiny, tiny victory way,
Yeah.
And that's what great climbers do. They were not born great climber. They're not supernatural strength. They don't have an extra finger that you don't have. It's just they kept trying. And it's beautiful to see the trying,
Absolutely. Well, it's the opposite of apathy.
Exactly. Well, I use that I use that word in my creativity book, saying the apathy is an enemy.
That's what you don't seem to have any of at all.
No, and apathy goes.
Like, that was like kind of the thing with the list and all that. I'm like, man, you are like anti-apathy.
But we live in a world that has a lot of illustration of apathy. I mean, I give you a stupid example. You open a magazine, mostly a fashion magazine, and you will see those young men or women, and they are like this in a sofa.
Right.
Now, it's not maybe their way. Maybe they are being directed. Relax or look. But nobody is erect. Nobody is alive. Nobody has a personality. They're all like, I don't know what to do.
It's cool to be like, whatever.
This is communicative. You look at those pictures, and it's very negative because it without even you thinking it, influence you in just leaning back.
It's true.
And so when I do workshops, let's say workshop on the art of the high wire, I said there are no rules in this workshop to my students. I said, actually there is one rule. No yawning.
Yeah.
Because yawning is like, it's an abandon. And I say, by the way, there are two rules.
And it communicates to everybody.
There are two rules. The other rule is no leaning. We are standing up on our 2 feet. We're doing all kind of exercise. It's going to take us 4 hours. I don't want to see somebody leaning against the wall.
Right.
And certainly there is a third rule.
Yeah.
No leaning while yawning.
Oh my God!
So here's for
That's
somebody
automatic.
who
You get kicked out of the class. If
absolutely,
you do that.
absolutely.
You're gone. If it's a lean yawn, forget it. This is like do you ever do yoga?
Not really, but in what I do in my life, I have borrowed from many ways of life, and I have seen yoga classes, never taken it, and I am sure I borrowed an attitude or an exercise. For example, on the wire, I do an exercise called Zen, and what it is, it's a yoga posture where my knees are balancing the balancing pole that is resting on the cable, and my hands are not touching the pole, but they are like in a meditative, a little bit like what you're doing right now.
Well, this keeps your spine totally erect. That's
exactly.
The thing. Like, if people think, you're showing off if you sit like that, but it's like, actually, it just completely takes all pressure off your spine.
So try that on the wire.
Oh, yeah?
That's exactly what I'm doing.
I'm ready for the class. I would love to learn
How
that.
do people contact you or find you online to know what you're doing or donate to your project?
I have. I will not mention the village where I live, not far from Woodstock. But in these days, principally on the internet and the social medias, which I don't participate.
You don't?
Well, I do Instagram because my friends told me I should, but I hate it and I don't believe in it, and I don't do anything else. But it is very easy to find a phone number or an address. I am also artist in residence, as I mentioned, at the Cathedral St. John the Divine. So I receive mail there, and then fans, who says, I would like to learn the why, I would like to know your next show and all that. So it's pretty easy to get in touch with me, even though I don't give my personal email, my phone number, and my address. But we live in a time where it's pretty easy to find out.
Pretty easy to find people.
Yeah.
Are you as disciplined in writing? I mean, it seems like you have, 11 books, you said? Or,
Yeah, 11 books.
Are you as disciplined daily with writing as you are with
No. I
other practices?
usually like to write a new book when I have a signed contract. And the money is in the bank.
Right on. Yeah.
It gives me a point of no return,
Okay.
At the same time, I am stricken to draw or to write little things here and there without warning, and I religiously put it in files, and then maybe this writing one day will become a book, or this drawing will become a show of drawing in a gallery.
Right.
So I do those things without any discipline of, it's Tuesday and from 9 to 12 I'm going to write, but
Right.
I always travel with two things, with a little pad and a pen, in case I observe something interesting or I have a thought, and then with a little sketch pad. I never take pictures when I travel, I draw. And sometimes I spend 2 hours somewhere drawing something, and sometimes drawing something ridiculous or weird, and people will pass by and will look, what is he drawing? Oh, he's drawing, and they will think I'm a madman, which probably is a good description of me. But anyway, that's what I do. So those things happen when they happen.
Okay, and when you do have some money or a contract and all that, and the money in the bank, then do you have I got to write a couple hours every day, or is
absolutely. Once there is a contract with the title of the book and the content of the book, then I have no choice, and I have a publication date, and I have a manuscript deadline. So I work usually with a very serious schedule. I create a schedule, I place that in my day no matter what, besides the rehearsal, besides the tons of things I want to do. I said, this month I'm going to spend 3 hours a day writing, or yes, absolutely. I force myself to follow a schedule. Once I am prisoner of a deadline for a book.
Right on.
The motivation, the
you should
deadline.
write a book called The Art of Organization.
Well, there is a lot of organization skill
organized.
in my book, Creativity, the Perfect Crime. Yeah, I
so
talk
there's a
lot.
relationship between staying super organized and sort of facilitating creativity, I guess.
Yes, and it's called Order and Chaos.
Okay.
Each chapter have a little title, and in Order and Chaos, I said, I make lists and I force myself and all that, and at the same time, I am ready to break the rules, and I come with I develop the inspiration falling from the sky, and so I think it's very important in life to have a certain order and rigidity and discipline, and at the same time to be playful, to break the rule, and to change your mind.
Yeah, well, discipline is a method towards freedom.
That's interesting.
I mean, in my life it is.
Never thought of it, but yes.
I mean, in my life it absolutely is. I have a daily discipline of running and yoga, and that keeps me free to stay off drugs, to keep myself healthy and engaged in life. So it's freedom in that regard.
Yeah.
But what do you think gives you all this sort of organizational skill? Where did this come from? 'Cause this is unusual levels of organization.
It came from an early age, probably teenager, on working on my arts, magic, juggling, the high wire, pickpocket, and many others, but those at the beginning, probably 16, 18, and trying to progress. So I give you a simple example. I lived in France for 45 years illegally in a broom closet.
Yeah.
It was too small to be called a studio.
That's amazing.
And I will pay a miserable amount of money for the rent. And I was there. There was a bed, there was a table, a window. I mean, I put my arm like this, I will touch the wall.
Okay.
And I actually lived there for 45 years, in and out, traveling around the world. The first thing I did when I came to that place, and I was 17, I was leaving my parents and being free, is to find in the garbage a big mirror. I put the mirror on the wall so I could see the magic, I could see the juggling, you know. This is how you learn those arts, with a mirror. And the mirror had a frame. So, for example, I was learning the 6 hoops, which is a lot of number of hoops to throw in the air and catch, you know. And so I thought, okay, I started to organize myself. I would say, okay, let's try to do one throw, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you catch them, which was a victory for me. You know, I had to learn 3 on the left, 3 on the right, and then try. So the first day, I managed to do 1 throw and catch them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then catch them. I put a little circle of white on the frame, those little circle of white that you put in a in a page of paper that has holes when you put them in a binder so it doesn't break off. It's a little reinforcement. So I buy like 1,000 of them. And then the next day, I did 2. So I put 2 circles. And then not very soon, but maybe after a year, the entire frame was covered with little circles. I didn't need those little circles anymore. Now I was... So this organization, as you call it, was a way very early for me to monitor my progresses.
Right, okay.
And to force myself to progress.
And to
Yesterday I
yourself.
did 2 bounds. Today I have to do at least 3 bounds.
Yeah.
Even if it takes me an hour, I'm not going to leave the rehearsal space until I do 3 bounds. So, and then you write it down. If you do 3 and yesterday you did 2, that's a victory. And that's how this organization slowly, but it was slowly, was created by me. It was not for the need to be organized. It was to monitor my progresses.
Right on. Okay. I was just curious if like it maybe came from like any kind of parental influence too.
Well,
like
my father
or...
was a very organized person, but my father and I hardly talk in our life. Only when he was 82 years old, a few months before he died, we became best friends. But my entire life, I was not communicating with my parents much. But he was a very organized person. So that's interesting. There is always something from the parents, even if you don't live with your parents, that influence you, I'm sure.
Yep. Yeah. And do you think maybe from your mom, the other chaotic part?
No, my mom was even more
cold,
separated from my idea of life. Probably wrongly so, you know. But I felt not really understood by my parents, and therefore my entire life was that of somebody who has almost no parents. It's a bit sad to say, but so no, I didn't remember and felt inspiring influences from my mother.
Okay. Well, how did you become best friends with your father at the end?
My girlfriend said, Philippe, this is ridiculous. This old man is going to die without having had a son.
Yeah.
You should invite him to one of your lectures. And I was doing a very prestigious lecture in Zermatt, Switzerland. We're talking about, 30 years ago. And she forced me to invite my father, who came and sit in the front row.
Wow.
And for the first time in his life, he saw films and he saw Q&A and he saw, element of discourse and all that. And he met his son. And he had tears during the intermission. And after the intermission, I talked about inspiring influences, even some that you don't recognize. And I say, well, there is an inspiring presence in this room, and I would like the Colonel Petit to stand up. And then people applauded, this is my father. And he had tears, I had tears, my girlfriend had tears.
I'm about to have
tears. And from that moment on, we became best friends for a couple of years until he left,
That's amazing.
So, you see, it's this is breaking the rules, Nothing should be written in a solid way. Certainly not in human relations and in creativity and in spirit,
That's beautifully said. Yeah, that's really inspiring to me personally too. My question to you though too is like when you did because you were just 25 when you crossed the Twin Towers, right?
I was 24, yeah.
24. Did that not like affect? I mean, and you achieved worldwide recognition.
I had achieved worldwide recognition dozens of years before that.
Oh, even before that.
No, not dozens of years. In 1971, I put a wire illegally between the towers of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, and I was virtually in a front page all over the world.
Right.
I actually remember, traveling around the world and saying, "Can you show me June 26th front page in Kenya?" I am in a front page. In India, I'm in a front page. In China. So I started clipping because I love to archive. And I have an album of all over the world, probably not all the newspapers. So that was a big fame at the time. The only country not interested was my own country.
Isn't that funny?
But it didn't bother me because I was traveling around the world.
That's the way. And, there's a cliche about that. Like everybody, you're a prophet everywhere, but in your old home or whatever.
Yeah, it's a little bit sad because it's a beautiful country where I would love to perform, and I have done some performing, but they don't seem to recognize me from the very beginning.
Interesting.
Which is basically Notre Dame in 71.
Yeah.
But yes, the 74, the World Trade Center was another worldwide recognition. In between, there was the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Illegally or legally?
Illegally in June 73, and I was again in the front page all over the world. So
and that didn't affect didn't your parents take pride in that?
Yeah, of course. When they would go to a cocktail party with a glass of champagne and people would say, "Hey, I saw your son, he walked the Twin Towers."
Yeah.
They were not going to say which son. They would say, "Oh yeah, isn't that great?" But still, this is not the recognition that inspired me, and
I understand.
I'm sure they could not be blind to the apparent success of their son, which actually was not a success at all. After the World Trade Center, I continued to struggle, continued to have many projects going to the garbage, continued to juggle in the street and pass my hat to survive.
Is that right?
Continue to try and try and try and try and fight.
But you had opportunities to probably shake the devil's hand, so to speak.
Well, I had many opportunities after the World Trade Center, and I said no to all those immensely money rewarding opportunities because they did not correspond to what I wanted to do. For example, TV commercials.
Right.
I was not going to use my high wire and saying
Toyotas.
If I walk on the wire it's because I am having a Rolex or I drink Heineken. Although I love Heineken, by the way.
Sure.
But and then I could have made like $500,000 in 42 seconds.
But that would have facilitated more of your art. So was that
and
a
it would
big
have
conflict?
rotten my soul. So I cannot, with the life that I had, fighting from 5 or 6 years old to impose my art, I was not going to agree with using my art to make money, even though that money could have helped in other things. I cannot think like that. I know we live in a country where this is inconceivable to not say yes to this kind of offers.
Right.
But I have a different soul, Well, it's not courageous. It's my blood in my veins, And when somebody offers me something that makes no sense, and I say no, and they start making more offer in the money, then I start being angry and foul and throw them out of my life because it's like trying to buy me and. It's ridiculous, but I cannot be bought.
And because you got that rebellious spirit. That rebellious spirit has not taken a break yet.
And it cannot. With the life that I have lived, I cannot make a U-turn saying, okay, I accept your $2 million and now I'm going to say I walk on the wire because of that product. Although we don't do those stupid commercials anymore. Now commercials are very sophisticated for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's a product that presents. Yeah. And if Coca-Cola presents Philippe Petit, I will say yes. You see? But if it is I drink Coca-Cola and that keeps me in balance, I will say no.
Right. I feel you.
Stupid example, but...
No, that's a good example. Yeah.
It's not the best thing to end with, but when Robert Zemeckis approached you, did they ask your permission to do that
Well,
film?
they had to, of course.
And how did you take to that?
Well, here is a very good example. When Robert Zemeckis called me, he called here, the house, and I was on the wire practicing. And my girlfriend picked up the phone. I didn't know who Robert Zemeckis Zemeckis was, but she knows everybody. And the conversation was very short. Hello, this is Robert Zemeckis. I would like to talk to Philippe Petit. Well, you can't. What do you mean I can't? He's on a high wire rehearsing. Call back in an hour. So he called back and he said, I would like to do a film about you. I said, I'm not interested. It was after Man on Wire.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also my rebellion, was in a way to test him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had to prove himself. He had to invite me to his world in California and show me the different film he was making. And I fell in love with the process because it was like my life. They were making model for certain films, and they were doing special effect and mask and all that. And it was fascinating. And I love some of his attention to detail and all that. So, and at some point I said the only way I would say yes to this is to be working with you. He said, Philippe, of course, I cannot do this film by myself. I need you to. And that was the beginning of a Hollywood lie, of course, They all welcome you and they say yes to everything. And at some point they say, hey, we cannot have two directors. And then they run away. And then you are left on the side. And then and the film took 10 years to do. And it changed, spirit and all that. But all that is to say, yes, of course, it was a movie adventure, very different than Man on Wire.
Did you watch that movie beginning to end?
Oh, I watched it many times, yeah. But they were probably a bit afraid of me. They never invited me, which was very stupid on their part, to participate in a promotion. And I participated in a promotion before we get the Oscar in India, Australia, all Europe, all America with Man on Wire. I will go to 300 theaters. It will be standing room only. I'll have a standing ovation. I'll do a Q&A. And because of that, we got the Oscar. I mean, I am sure.
And because it's a great documentary.
They were, I believe, I don't know, it's my view, but they were afraid of me participating in the movie that I have been a little bit, put aside at some point after 10 years. So? Why is because my mind was so intense when I was working with Zemeckis that when they said, thank you, we don't need you much more, we'll invite you to the screening at the end. They must felt if this guy tells a certain thing, it's not good. So I don't know. It's my vision. It might not have happened like that. But they did not invite me to any screening. When they went to France, they didn't invite me. They invited two of my friends who helped putting the wire. When they went to Moscow, I speak Russian. They didn't invite me. So I thought this is ridiculous, and the film had the shortest run in the history of filmmaking. After 2 weeks, the film The Walk didn't exist anymore, and Man on Wire continues. So anyway, that is not to say that the film is bad of Zemeckis.
I loved it.
Many people love it. It has great spirit, but it's not my film, and I don't know why they did not invite me to follow it.
I have a theory. Why? Because you're not containable, you're not controllable.
That is true. That is a compliment. This is
of course that's
the
conclusion.
A compliment, dude. Yeah, this is the conclusion.
Yeah.
Because you know what? For somebody, and mostly an artist and a poet like you, a musician, a painter, a poet, to tell me you are uncontrollable, it's a supreme compliment. So I say thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Petit.
Appreciate you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great, guys. That was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Hi, this is Joseph Arthur. Thanks for checking out Come to Where I'm From. Please support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Come to Where I'm From. We are an independent podcast, and any contributions you can make are greatly appreciated.